Hi kawan, welcome to EDC Ready. Today I have finally a full review of this knife. This is the Civivi Mckenna. It's a very interesting knife out of Civivi. If you don't know Civivi, they are a budget brand of WeKnife. So WeKnife used to be an OEM and original equipment manufacturing factory, and now they make their own stuff with their own in-house designers, and I think they're doing a really great job. And the Civivi lines have actually been one of my favorite lines recently, especially with the introduction of Elijah Isham, one of my favorite designers out right now. If I can get the camera to focus, yep, that's his maker's mark. One of my favorite designers right now, and well, he just makes really odd, really weird, but at the same time somehow like surprisingly practical and ergonomic knife designs out there. So without further ado, let's get this rolling. Now, before I begin, let us have some quick measurements. Starting with the blade thickness, it comes in at 0.1 inches. We have the blade length, which should come in at about 2.9 or so. Alright, so the blade thickness is at, it's a bit long, 2.95 or so inches, which is great. Closing it up, handle length is 3.76 inches. The handle thickness, which is one of my most important criteria, is 0.4 inches. And my other favorite thing to measure is the width of the blade itself, and that comes in at 0.87 inches. Okay. So just to do a little bit of size comparison with another small knife in my collection, this is the Spyderco Dragonfly. As you can see here, it is a longer knife. Okay, this is a 2.5 or so, this is 2.95, so it's longer there, but at the same time the handle is not too different. Okay, yeah, it has a bit of a longer butt here, but then these are both very small, very ergonomic knives. They share some similarities, and they share some differences that actually make me prefer this knife over this knife. So I'll explain that a little bit later on. Let's get the weighing scale out. Again, my weighing scale measures in grams, so let's do a bit of conversion. We have here 0 grams. Knife here, we are coming in at about 51 grams, which is about 1.8 ounces. Just to compare with the Dragonfly, which is coming in at 34 grams, which is even lighter, which I think is about 1.2 ounces or so. Not quite sure, I don't have the measurements in hand. Alright, so without further ado, don't forget to check out my description in the box down below. Then you can find out how you can support this channel. Oh, by the way, I'm also really considering selling this knife. I'm pretty sure I'm going to sell this knife after I finish this review. So let's get into the review, starting from tip to butt. Let's start with the blade. The blade I really like. I really like this blade. The blade material is Chinese D2, which is, well, it's just D2 made in China, and I think it's a great steel. D2 is extremely tough and holds an edge really well, especially among the category of the budget steels. A couple of things I don't like about D2. D2 is, well, it's really only one thing I don't like about D2. D2 is not considered a stainless steel. To be considered a stainless steel, you need a certain percentage of chromium, which D2 doesn't have. D2 has maybe 1 to 2% less percentage of chromium needed to be classified as stainless, which means that it is semi-stainless. You know, I take care of my blades. I wipe it with some mineral oil every now and then, so it's not that big of a deal. But living in hot and humid Malaysia, it's in my pocket, I sweat a lot. It's just an extra thing for me to take care of. If this came out in like CTS XHP, it would be great. If it came out in 440C, it would be great as well. If it came out in their 9CR 18 MOV, which they also use over there in Civivi, that would be great as well. But D2, not such a bad thing. Okay, so this is also my first Sheepsfoot blade, and I've always fancied a Sheepsfoot blade. I've never owned one, and now that I've owned one, I really like it. You know why? You don't have a lot of belly. Okay, it is mostly a very shallow belly and a very long flat area here with a nice sharp point. The point here is extremely sharp, if I can show it to you, which is great for the kind of cuts that I use on a daily basis. If it was a okay, so this is not a good example, but let's say it's a knife with a lot of belly, like my, hold on, let me get it, like this knife. This is my, sorry, like my Roik P801, it has a nice belly, a lot of flat and a nice amount of belly. It's great for these kind of slicing cuts. But this kind of slicing cuts is not a type of cut that I use very often. I use a lot more of penetrate and pull kind of cuts, or in some cases penetrate and push kind of cut. So that is where this blade shape really helps. You can really press it in and then you can pull. It's great because the surface is right there for you to poke in and pull, and same thing if you want to push, like so. Now, one thing about this blade that really catches me off guard, and I didn't know it was a thing, and I didn't know how much I appreciated it until it came about. But there's actually a little dip here. Okay, this is not exactly straight. There is like a little, just the slightest bit of downturn here, and that's great because actually it's a great place to rest your finger. It's a very nice place to have your finger placed there, and having that little dip means that you can actually put in more force in the tip. So you can actually push through it even more effectively because of this. In a different knife, let's say this knife, where you don't really have like a little dip here, you can still press it in, but you're using the pressure only from the back of your palm to push it in. In this case, like, I can even control the tip even more effectively with this, because then your finger makes it more of a precision piece, and that's fantastic. Another thing I really like about this blade is just how thin and how slicey it is. This is the sliciest blade I've ever used, even compared to my Dragonfly, which also has a blade thickness that is maybe just slightly thinner than this. I think this is at 0.09, this is at 0.1. However, it comes to an extremely fine edge. Just the best slicer I've ever had in my collection, and couple that with a very sharp tip, it also becomes the best penetrator of my collection. Another thing I really like is that the blade is nice and rounded at the top here, so it's nice and comfortable on your hands. No jimping, but personally, would I like jimping? Where this little dip is, where you rest your finger, if you had just a little bit of very light jimping there, just like in the back of the flipper tab here, right there, if you can see it. Yeah, if you had that kind of jimping over here, then that would be absolutely great, but it's not necessary. This thing still holds really well. Now, Elijah Isham has his, there's no word for it, but I call it the Isham hole, which is this triangle here. Maybe he's part of the Illuminati. I don't know. Elijah, don't come looking for me. Compared to a spider hole, which is just round. Now, to be honest, this is just a design touch. There's no way that I can use this. Like, I can't really get my finger into it. It makes it easier to, in fact, you don't even need to grip it to, well, I guess you can grip it to pull it out two-handed, but it's just for decoration. Another thing, it has a nice sharpening choil, which helps it like avoid recurving if you sharpen it. So some knives you have a little, it kind of goes into the plunge grind a little bit and it causes a recurve over time. This one doesn't. It has a good sharpening choil. It doesn't really have a finger choil. You can, this part here that's unsharpened, you can technically put your finger there and then use it. I wouldn't, because it's very shallow, it's not deep enough, so you might just easily slip onto the blade, and we all don't want that. And why would you want to do this when you can do this with this knife? It's really designed for either this kind of grip or this kind of grip, and it's extremely comfortable in both. Alright, moving back. Flipper tab. My first ever front flipper. I've tried the Roik front flipper. Really hard detent, really hard front flipper. Kind of uncomfortable to use as a front flipper, but this, yeah, this is easy. Now, taking this out of the bag, it took me just a few flips to figure out how to do it with my right hand, and with a few more flicks, I learned how to do it with my left hand. The detent is amazing. Front flippers, because it's not so common, it can be a little bit more difficult to get the detent right because there's, well, less experimentation. But Civivi, their detents are just amazing. Civivi makes amazing detents. Now, another thing I like about this is that you have jimping, as I mentioned. If I can get this close to... Alright, now it has jimping all the way around the flipper tab, which is great. It adds nice amount of traction. But the jimping, another thing they did really well is the jimping. There's no sharp edges on the sides here, and in fact I think each jimping is actually rounded off, so you get the grip, but you don't get the kind of sharpness that you get from other jimping. For example, this Roik P801, now the edges here are rounded, so you don't get the sharp pointy bits here, but the individual jimps itself are very abrasive. Great if you want good texture, but for a front flipper and your soft thumb right here, that might not be the best way to do it. Another jimp that I find quite abrasive is the Spyderco jimp, which is right here. Again, this one is not as well rounded on the side, so you do get a bit of a sharp cornering here, but these jimps are that perfect balance of grip and comfort. Another thing about this front flipper is that the front flipper it protrudes all the way around the pivot. So when you try to flick it, you can see that you can actually have the flipper outside the body all the way around. So this is great because you can have like you can include momentum throughout the entire flip, compared to regular flipper, okay, which once you get past this area, you can't add any more momentum. So everything is based off of that strong detent and the smoothness of the action. So really well done, really well done. Next up, moving down, let's talk about the pivot. The pivot is very nice. It's a non-free spinning pivot. It has a little D-shaped cutout on the inside here. You can check it out in my disassembly video. This helps you make sure that when you turn this out, this doesn't turn out. So very nice, very good. Moving back, the lock bar. This is a liner lock. The lock bar here, again, it has jimping, but each jimping is actually rounded on all sides, which makes this really comfortable to push with your finger. It makes it really comfortable. It doesn't have that kind of sharp feeling that this has. So this has jimping too. It has nice jimping, rounded around the edges, but the jimps itself are a little bit sharp. It's not going to cut you, but it just feels a little bit uncomfortable compared to this, which feels very comfortable. Couple that with the fact that all the liners are bead blasted. This is satin finish, but all the liners are bead blasted right here, which gives it this nice like matte finish, which I really like. In fact, the back of the blade here is also bead blasted, so it doesn't have any kind of sharp edges at all. All the edges on the liners are rounded, which makes it even more comfortable in the hand. And speaking about comfort in the hand, the ergonomics, the material here is G10. And I personally like my green and black combo, my OD green and my black combo. G10 with a very long G10 back spacer, which gives it that very solid feeling. And on top of that, every edge here that is not the blade itself is rounded. So all these edges here have nice rounding. All the metal parts on the inside have nice rounding. The back spacers are rounded nicely. Just everything is like well designed to be as comfortable in your hand as possible. It's not contoured. This is quite flat. But at the same time, all the edges here make up for it just because of how comfortable it is in the hand. Speaking of the scales here, as I mentioned, are G10, but they are that perfect, in my opinion, that perfect balance between roughness and smoothness. So these parts are a little bit rougher, and then these parts are a little bit smoother. Makes it nice in the hand and doesn't eat up your pocket. A G10 such as the PM3 or the Paramilitary 2, sorry. The Para 3 or the PM2, the G10 tends to be a little bit rougher. This one is nice, it's not too bad. A couple of complaints that I do have, actually one of the few complaints. The first one is that I wish it was more of a stainless steel, like a 9CR or a CTS XHP, but that's not too bad. The clip here, clip is good, it's nice and long, so when you actually put this in your pocket, it doesn't feel like it's bouncing around. However, it does create a bit of a hot spot if you really bear down on it. But to be honest, this knife is not a hard use kind of knife, so you don't really need to bear down on it so much. But what is a big deal is here, nice and deep carry, but the screws protrude out into the path a little bit. So there are some pants that I can't wear this with because of those screws, and it kind of annoys me a little bit because here's the Reich, and they do the same thing, but the screws kind of go up into the clip. Fortunately, the clip in this is I think just a tad bit higher. So actually no, they're about the same. So they both had the same problem, which is that since the screws are in there, it can kind of catch up on your pants a little bit. And even Spyderco's wire clip does this a little bit. In fact, I think Spyderco's wire clip, the screws itself are actually a little bit higher, and they actually go up a little bit higher in the clip, which kind of, well, annoyed me because it's not as bad as the Spyderco, but it still kind of annoys me. Another thing that I really like is that to take the knife apart, you need to unscrew this pivot and you need to unscrew this screw, and you can leave the clip on and you can remove the knife. The great thing about this is that the pivot screws and the back screws are actually the same size. They're both T8 screws, which means to disassemble it, I just need one bit, pump, pull it out, and it's great. Very easy construction to take apart and to put back together. Now let's talk about the back of the knife here. The back of the knife here has this nice shape here, this nice little jump right here, and it actually matches what am I saying? It matches the shape of the sheep's foot blade right here. Now I like that because when you wrap your hand around, you actually get your pinky in the back here, and then because it's in the back here, you can actually use it for like a driving motion. You can really drive it through. The Dragonfly does that as well. You have this little piece here that you come in here, and you can really push through. Alright, so that adds a little bit more tension, or more strength, more power into the penetrating power of this knife, which I really like. Now, just like the worst nitpick ever, I would say about this is that when it's in your pocket, let's say it's in my right pocket, this part right here sticks out a bit, so if I want to go in and grab my phone, my hand will hit the top corner here. It is the worst nitpick. Like, I've never had to nitpick a knife as much as I did this one, because of just how much I really like this knife. I made sure I took as much time as possible. I carried this more than any other knife for review, because I want to make sure that I really get a sense of how much I dislike this knife, because the rest of this knife, I really love it. So a couple of ways you can get about this. You can actually flip it to the other side, put it in your right pocket, so it actually goes around your hand like that. You can do that if you want to. There's no danger of the knife cutting you at all because of this back spacer, but it's just the smallest thing that I can think of that I can complain about. Alright, so yeah, the comparison between this and the Dragonfly. Couple of things that sets this apart. Okay, the first thing is the action. The action here is fantastic. With a little shake, it just drops, and that's amazing. Looking at how light the blade is, the action is great. The flipping action is just pump. It just fires out, or you can even do it slowly. You can just go and push it out like that. Very nice. Some people can do it with their forefinger, pull it at the front. Some people can I don't know, some people can do one of these, which, yeah, I guess I can do it, although I don't suggest it because of how dangerous it is. So that's something. The action is great. It really showcases, number one, Civivi makes very smooth knives. Number two, they make really good detents. Now, this doesn't really have that kind of smooth fall shutty action because it is a backlock. It's not too bad, but I actually prefer this, for fidgeting 90% of the time compared to this. This is not bad if you work it enough, but this came out of the box perfect in terms of action. Another thing I really like about it is just how slim or how narrow this knife is. You put this in your pocket, coupled with the lightness at 1.8 ounces, you really don't feel this at all. It is very slightly thicker than the Roy P801, which is an extremely thin knife, and also it's thicker than the Dragonfly, but coupled with the lightness, and more importantly, coupled with the narrowness of this knife, this is just fantastic in the pocket. So a knife spends about 50% of the time in my hand and 50% of the time in the pocket. So this is great in the hand, but this is great in the pocket and in the hand. Just to give you a bit of size difference, slightly longer, but it is so much more narrower. Like almost the entire spide hole sticks out of this. Alright, so that's it. Time for the conclusion. Now, what kind of person would you be if you want to get this knife? If you're the kind of person that uses your knife lightly, if you are an office person, you don't beat up your knife, you're not chopping down trees or whatever that you do with your knife, you're not cutting up branches and all that, you're gonna like this knife. If you are the kind of person that likes a great action, you're gonna like this knife. If you like a nice fall shutty action, you're gonna like this knife. You want a nice fidgety knife, you're gonna like this knife. You like a knife that is very small in the pocket, you're gonna like this knife. You want a knife that is that has good wear resistance, you're gonna like this knife. If you want a knife that is a nice ergonomic in the hand, and as I already mentioned, in the pocket, very small, very light, very carryable, you're gonna like this knife. You're gonna like this knife in many different situations. I can't really think of many situations where you don't like this knife. If you're very concerned about knife maintenance and about rust, this is not necessarily going to be the knife for you. If you're the kind of person with bigger hands, this might not be the knife for you. And if you're the kind of guy that really beats up, really pries with your knife, you're better off getting a fixed blade or a pry bar. So what's the conclusion here? Conclusion is, I love this knife. This knife is amazing. It's my first Civivi knife, and it's my first Elijah Isham design knife, and I guess put those two things together, this is pretty much the best things that I want in a knife. Maybe with the exception of the clip screws, okay, and the exception of a stainless steel blade. Everything else in this knife is done amazingly well. Okay, and then with this knife, I'm actually really considering, and I think I am going to sell this dragonfly because this satisfies everything that this dragonfly can satisfy. Everything that this dragonfly can satisfy. It is a nice small blade, extremely light knife, extremely easy to carry around in your pocket, and extremely thin. And yep, that's just it, guys. I think I should just stop before I just keep going. I love this knife. I love this knife. I love this knife. Alright, and yeah, so just a little bit of an update. This might actually be the first knife that I buy twice. I'm really looking at the Damascene blade. So, sorry, not Damascene. This knife comes in a Damascus steel blade, which is a nice like dual steel pattern welded kind of blade. Gonna get it with a black G10 because I'm looking for a custom scale maker to create some carbon fiber scales for this knife. Alright, and that's all, guys. Hope you guys like this review. It came out a little bit late because, well, I just really want to spend time with the knife. Oh, one last thing. The Lockbar here, it's this part of the scales is nice and scalloped. It dips down a little bit so that you can get to the Lockbar a little bit easier. Alright, that's all, guys. Just remember to stay ready. Do follow me on Instagram for all my knife news and everything I post up on almost a daily basis. And don't forget to check me out on Patreon because that's where I'm going to sell this knife at a discount. Alright, stay ready, guys.